Namaskar Bharat. For the first time ever, we are hosting an MBA Times Fair event specifically tailored towards candidates from India. But if you're joining from any other part of the world, feel free to stay because the frameworks can still be useful to you. And today, as you can see on the screen, we'll be discussing Kellogg School of Management at Northwestern University. The series of live streams that we have been doing will consist less of marketing like other MBA fairs do, but more of quality content that focuses on completing important sections of your MBA applications like your resume, essays, letter of recommendations, etc. And depending on the availability, we'll also dive deeper into the application of what we learn here by looking at the samples. So let's get to it. Think bravely, as Kellogg always says, and we are being brave enough to start this session 1 minute late. So a couple of things before we look at the agenda for today. First, you can scan this QR code that's right there on the screen. It will take you to a WhatsApp group. This WhatsApp group will serve as a medium for you to ask any questions while the session goes on. And towards the end, when we have live Q&A session, you can get those answered live as well. So if you have questions later, for example, like before you submit your application for round 2, you can ask any of those questions too, and you'll still get those answered. And it eliminates the biggest problem that many people have had with webinars, that their questions are not getting answered. And we've just tried to solve this problem for you. For the agenda, we'll look at the values first, what values define the school and the class profile, which will help you understand what the statistical requirements are for getting into Kellogg, and also what kinds of personality a Kellogg leader needs to have. Next, we'll look at the essays and resume, which are obviously the backbone of your application. We'll look at the letters of recommendation samples, and I will give you the tips on that. And it goes without saying that you will not be the one writing it. So you can share that samples with the one who will be writing that so that they can create the LORs for you. It will also be shared in the same Q&A group, for which the link is still up there in the QR code. So if you've been able to scan this, great. If you've not been able to scan this, it's completely fine. We'll come back to this in the very, very end. Looking at the values first, there are some keywords that really stand out for Kellogg. That will be creativity, empathy, opportunity, collaboration, intentionality, innovation. These things are what define Kellogg and Kellogg Leader. If you just look up the term Kellogg Leader on the internet, lots of things will pop up. And there is a dedicated page on what Kellogg means by Kellogg Leader. And we'll discuss that when we come to the essay questions. But these are the keywords that kind of make Kellogg what it is. You can also call these like the pillars on which Kellogg actually creates, like, the program basically. So that's it for the keywords. Another thing would be that whenever you look at a particular keyword, for example, creativity or empathy, what is the first thing that pops up in your head in terms of a backstory that can give you an idea of like what you should be showing the business school? So this kind of helps with brainstorming also. So whenever you read a keyword, just think about some sort of a backstory from your past, and that will give you a little bit of an idea of like who you are as a person and if you're actually a Kellogg leader or not. So that's mostly for brainstorming purposes. Moving on, we have the class profile. Interesting animations here. So the class profile, let's start with the GMAT score from the top. So the GMAT score is 687 for the focus and 733 for the legacy. For students who are coming from India, people who are considered from the overrepresented pool by the admissions team, generally speaking, I suggest having the 99th percentile for the M7 and the top 15s usually. And for Kellogg, you can actually see like their scores are at par with what Harvard, Stanford, Wharton, and the likes of those demand. So you can actually see that. Then the GRE score is at 324 on average, with 162 for verbal and 162 for quant. Same rule for the people from overrepresented pool. So like 334 would cut it for you. So 10 points up. That's a big jump, but like 330 to 334 is generally the score I've seen many people get in. And the number of people who get in with a lower score are much less. Anyhow, moving on to the work experience, 5.1 years on average, anywhere between 3 to 6 years or 3 to 7 years even is fine, depending on what your demographic is and what your goals are. It really doesn't matter what exactly you want to do post MBA if you change your mind, at least when you get into the program. But for the post MBA goals that you currently have in mind, make sure that your experience is in the range for that. GPA at 3.68, pretty much M7 standard, like 3.7 adjacent. Class size at 534, not really huge, not really small, a decent class size to have. Like 534 is like a good spot to be in, at least as an M7 or a top 15 school. So good enough size of the alumni. They also have other programs like the Kellogg MMM program, which also grants people one more degree in design. Another one is the MBA program, which also helps people who are going in the technology industry to also work with McCormick School of Engineering. So there is also an added alumni network within the MBA space. I think there's an MBA as well. So like multiple options available. So like strength wise and size wise, decent. Veterans at 9%. This was actually noted in their class profile this year that they have increased the number of veterans because of a new program that they've launched. International students at 37%. Now, international students could also be dual citizens who are also reported within the same numbers. So I'm not sure how many of these are purely international, that people who are coming from a different country, and how many of them are actual US citizens who also hold another passport. So 37% is an amalgamation of both, could be an amalgamation of both. So if you want to get clarification on this, connect with the admissions team. Commerce grads, like now we are talking about the undergraduate majors, by the way. So commerce grads are usually the majority in Kellogg. So 49%. I know 49% is not the majority, but that's like the winning vote because others are much less. STEM majors are at 41, humanities and others are at 21, which is the minority students. When I say minority, I mean like the undergraduate major minority, not like minority. And it's not totaling up to 100 because there are some people who have dual majors. So it could be commerce plus STEM or STEM plus humanities. So that's why there is a little bit of an overlap there. Moving on, we have the essays. Essays, as you already have heard, I've said before, are like the basis on which you will be judged. So the first essay is something like this. Intentionality. We know, remember that we discussed this in the keywords. Intentionality is a key aspect of what makes our graduates successful Kellogg leaders. Huge surprise there because I spoiled the surprise by giving you the keywords first. Help us understand your journey by articulating your motivations for pursuing an MBA. That's fine. Why do you want to get an MBA? The specific goals you aim to achieve. If you've attended previous sessions, you already know where we are going with this. And why you believe now is the right moment. Like, why MBA? What are your short-term goals? And why now? In short, that's basically what it's asking. Moreover, share why you feel Kellogg is best suited to serve as a catalyst for your career aspirations, and what will you contribute to our community of lifelong learners during your time here. So the word limit, I think, is approximately 450 words. You can go a little bit above. I think they allow error of 30 to 40 words. So like you can assume that you have some space of 500-ish words, less than that, obviously. So let's start by dissecting it first. So why are they talking about intentionality in this? So the first thing that you need to know is intentionality means that you are actually someone who is taking calculated steps while in the MBA program, which are directed towards your goal. So think of your goal as like a target that you set, and then think of yourself trying to shoot at that target. How exactly will you be shooting at that target? Will you just stand randomly and just like shoot in the air? That's one way to achieve the goals. Maybe the bullet just strikes, who knows? But let's assume that you need some support. So in this case, Kellogg is that support. So what exactly will you do? Usually when you're trying to shoot a target, maybe you probably want to have a base for yourself. Maybe you want to lay down a little bit. Maybe you need some additional equipment so that you can see better. And all those things that you see in the Olympics. I think one of the guy from Turkey actually got viral because he didn't use any of those things. So if you compare that with this particular situation, Kellogg is actually asking you how intentional are you about achieving that target. So what exactly are the things that Kellogg will give you? What exactly are you trying to do in terms of achieving that goal? Why do you want to shoot that target? Do you get something? Do you not get something? So that's basically all it is asking. It's simple question, but there's a lot fused into it, because if you remember from other sessions that I've hosted, goals question is usually very separate from what you will contribute to a community. And then there is also like the why this particular school is also a question. So this is an amalgamation of like three different essays into one, and they're only giving you like what, 450 words to explain it. So all right, let me just give you the structure and it will give you an idea on how to create this essay. It's a very straightforward way of dealing with this one. So here's the structure. First, you start with the goals. What goals do you have in mind? So you have to narrow that down by function, industry, location, what companies you want to be applying to, and how exactly is it associated with Kellogg in some capacity. So goals wise, let's take management consulting as an industry. Kellogg does have a lot of alumni in management consulting. Mostly people are going there for that. Then we have the function. Mostly post MBA people are trying to join associate as a function. Then the location, what location do you want to go to? Kellogg usually feeds to Chicago amongst other territories, but Chicago is the dominant one. So location wise, we're going to go to Chicago. Then we have the companies. What companies are you trying to apply to? McKinsey, Bain, BCG, whichever you have in mind, all the big fours, those are also there. So give a very brief idea about what your goals are. Don't waste too many words on this. My goal is to be an associate in the management consulting industry in Chicago region in companies such as McKinsey or whatever companies you have in mind. Simple. Then we move on to what support you will need. Remember, I talked like what kind of support that you will be looking for. So the first support that you give yourself is your own. Cliche, but that's the idea. So motivation is the support you give yourself. So why exactly do you want to be in consulting as an industry? There are multiple other options available post MBA, fairly lucrative opportunities. You can also become a leader in any of the companies and corporate roles. You could later become the CEO, who knows? So what is your motivation behind just joining a consulting industry? So let me just give you an example. Someone who recently, like couple of years have passed in that, but someone saw that he actually likes to get businesses to succeed. That's a great motivation, but that doesn't make you a leader, does it? So why exactly does this person like seeing others succeed? Because he is trying to make a better world for others through his ideology and helping the businesses that should do some good for society succeed. So that is a decent motivation to have. And in addition to that, he also has done some things like that in the past that gave him some idea that yes, this is exactly what I want to be. So that some backstory is also there to that. So what is your motivation behind going in consulting? Are you planning to exit consulting sometime in the future and become a corporate leader or start your own company? Depends. So that's basically the idea, that what's your motivation behind your post MBA goals. Second support that you will need is transferable skills, because let's take an example again. I was speaking to someone who was way too confident and was, I wouldn't call him arrogant, but he had a decent idea of what he wanted in life. And we were just talking about entrepreneurship. He's like, I can actually, I was really close to starting a company. All I lacked was just some people who can help me succeed. It's okay, but then I gave him a little bit of a idea of what it sounds like, and I told him that, and I also want to start a company like SpaceX. The only thing that's missing is like the people to start the company, the capital to start the company, and the right kind of support I need. So that's the idea. Like when you're speaking about your goals and you're speaking in the air, everything is achievable, but you have to show what exactly do you currently possess as transferable skills so that you can achieve these goals in a decent time frame of 2 years, because the MBA is usually 2 years. So some transferable skills from mostly your past, that will be the idea. So that's transferable skills. Then feasibility checks. Feasibility check is like one of the easier way to find feasibility for a goal is to probably demonstrate your personal network. Maybe you have probably a cousin or like an uncle, someone in any of your target companies who could serve as a mentor for you. So there is a little bit of a higher feasibility for you to get in because of those networking contacts that you already have. So that is also a support. If you have a company's letter of support, for example, some people who already are working for McKinsey or Bain or BCG get these offers in general that they can just come back to these companies. So that is also another feasibility check. So what is your feasibility check? Mention that. So that's basically the idea. You then like you first talked about your goals, very short. Then you tell them why exactly do you want to pursue your goals. Then you show some transferable skills that you have to achieve your goals, and then you give them a feasibility check. That's basically the idea here. It will take up at least 75 to 100 words to complete the whole thing. Then we have why Kellogg. Very simple and straightforward. And if you've attended the previous sessions that I've done on why a particular school, I talk about resources. So here we'll just pick two resources. And for people who are just joining, and this is their first time, for every resource, I tell people to only have 150 words dedicated to any resource that they are going to talk about. Simple and straightforward. So let's say your resource could be a club, your resource could be a center, your resource could be any specific events or competitions that you want to be a part of, or maybe even the student government. That is also a form of a club, you can say, but it's technically not a club. It is what governs the club. So that's basically the idea that you talk about two resources. It could be any resources, but they have to do something with your goals. So in this particular scenario, you can always talk about the consulting club as one resource because they also do the case workshops. There is also the events that are happening there. All those things always keep happening. And then you focus on the depth. So when do you plan to use the resource? There is usually a timeline for consulting recruiting. How exactly will you be utilizing the consulting club in that time frame is something that needs to be explained. Who told you about that consulting club? This shows how much you have networked with the school and if you have actually really thought things through. So who has told you about the resource? What was the name of the resource? So every single school has a consulting club in the top 25 at least. So they have different names for that. So what is the name of their consulting club? How exactly do you plan to utilize the consulting club while you're there? And why do you want to be a part of the consulting club? So don't give a lazy answer like I want to be a part of the consulting club because my goal is to go in consulting. It's like saying that I don't want to go out in the rain because I'll get wet. There's no point in talking like that. So like the idea here is to go in depth about like the specific things about that resource. Like I said, the events that happen there, the alumni who come back who will be useful in networking, the kinds of case workshops that happen in those clubs, and how exactly you will be able to achieve a community, like a sense of community with people who have a shared purpose with you, and you can support each other's growth sometime in the future. So that kind of a vibe we're looking for, not like, just said something that you don't want to say. So that's basically the idea behind why Kellogg. And for every resource, you have to dedicate around like 150 words. If you spend like 120 words, it's also fine. So 120 each, that's 240 words. Now we have much less space left, which we'll spend on talking about why you, because it's your application, it's not my application. So why do you want to be at Kellogg and why should they take you? So in pursuit of your goals, what will others get from you? Basically the idea. So you can actually fuse this with the resources if you want to. If you have a consultant, this is something I recommend. But if you're writing this yourself and this is the first time you're writing something, you can connect to the previous resources that you've talked about. That in the first year, maybe you will utilize the resource to get probably internship at whatever company you have in mind. Maybe in the future, you can try to attract some of the people who have leadership positions in those companies to the campus so that they can also help recruitment of others who couldn't get in the first year. So maybe that is when you will do the stuff like the second year, when you take up the leadership position in probably the consulting club as whatever VP of whatever, or even the president. What will others get from you when you take up a certain position? So same idea behind this: when, who, what, how, and why. What exactly will others get out of you? How will you give back to others? And why do you want to give back to others? Simple. Moving on to essay number 2, which goes something like this. Again, we are looking at the word Kellogg leader a lot. So I would definitely recommend looking this term on Google, because if you get an idea of what they mean by a Kellogg leader, you will probably be able to create a more impactful application, in my opinion. Anyhow, this is the essay prompt. Kellogg leaders are primed to tackle challenges everywhere, from the boardroom to their neighborhoods. Describe a specific professional experience where you've had to make a difficult decision. Reflecting on this experience, identify the values that guided your decision-making process and how it impacted your leadership style. I'll let that sink in for a second. Right. So they're speaking about the professional experience where you had to make a difficult decision. That part is pretty straightforward. I don't need to explain this to you because I'm pretty sure you're all English speakers. But the last part is where there's a lot of gray area, because there is a lot of understanding required on how exactly will a particular person with a particular personality face a particular situation and make a particular decision. I said particular a lot, but what kind of personality will go through what kinds of values to think about a decision and then come at a conclusion. So that is the thing. Like, if you remember, we talked about the keywords a little bit. Kellogg looks for empathy. Kellogg looks for people who think bravely. Kellogg looks for people who are seeking opportunities in some sort of creative ways. So that is what a Kellogg leader is. Once you have understood that, what a Kellogg leader is, then you slowly get into the decision-making process of how exactly does an empath arrive at a decision for a particular situation, and empath is put through. How exactly is someone who needs to think bravely or look in an opportunistic side come to the conclusion for a particular situation? So when you expose different kinds of personalities to different kinds of stimuli, they have different responses for this. So that's basically the idea here also. You need to be able to understand what exactly is driving your own stimulus in that particular situation. So that's why the last part is the most dangerous part, because that is how they're trying to check your alignment with the Kellogg's keywords or values, as they like to call it. And how did it impact your leadership style? So if you're showing this as a growth story, that this is these are the things that led me to become the Kellogg leader that I am right now, that's great. You can always try that option. Nothing wrong with it. So that's basically how you tackle this question. Now we'll discuss the structure. So you can see the format here. We'll be following the SAR format. So SAR, if you remember from any of the previous sessions, if you've attended, means situation, actions, and results. So you give them an idea of what your situation was, what were the specific actions you took, because the actions is what you'll be judged on. And R is basically like the decision that you arrived at in that particular situation. So values, Kellogg is trying to see how you are using the approach of a Kellogg leader. Pretty simple, we just discussed that. Then keywords are very essential when you are trying to walk them through how you arrived at that particular decision. So are you able to show empathy? Did you act in a creative fashion? Did you come up with a solution where everyone wins and it was some kind of like a out of the box solution? Then did you follow a collaborative approach? So there are different kinds of approaches to leadership. There is also a approach called dictatorial approach that many people like to take, that just do as directed. That's not the approach Kellogg likes. How exactly are you collaborating with the other person to arrive at that difficult decision that we are going to be experiencing in this particular question? So that's collaborative approach. Then eventually you have to lead them to believe that how that shaped you as a Kellogg leader, that particular decision-making process. And you have to keep it very subtle. You don't have to use the word Kellogg leader very specifically. You will obviously question me and say, didn't you just tell me that this is all about like, intentionality? Yeah, it's about intentionality, but like this question is not like that. This question is very subtle, and they're trying to ask you about the situation. They're not asking you about Kellogg. So, like, if you bring up Kellogg in that situation, it just like, ruins the mood. That it's not something that they're looking for in the answer for this question. So be subtle in this, follow the SAR format. In the actions, you should be able to show them the values of Kellogg and the keywords, and how exactly did you think about it from an empathy standpoint, from a creativity standpoint, from a collaboration standpoint, and arrive at an answer. For this one thing, I also suggest you do one more thing. When you have created the draft completely on your own, okay, this is the keyword, on your own, you can also take like a help of a consultant to see if you're like probably coming across as a Kellogg leader or not. If you don't have a consultant, it's fine. You can also put it in AI and see if these decisions that are guiding your, sorry, if these actions that are guiding your decisions coming across as that of a Kellogg leader or not. So I'm asking you to use AI not to create the application, because I already said you have created the draft yourself. AI will just give you their own opinion that this is what I think it's coming across as, and it can help you improve if you want to. So that's basically it, and pretty straightforward on this front also. That completes our essays, and we'll move on to the resume section. Let's flip it, and now we are on the resume. And there's a train going by, so it's a very interesting time to change the slides also. It feels very like, swift. Okay, so a few things to remember before we move on to the whatever's happening on the slide. For resume, if you've attended the previous session, we are actually going to discuss the same stuff. So if you just want to join the Q&A chat now, that's good. Otherwise, you can stay till the end. You'll get what you'll get in the end as a surprise. So let's see that. And the second thing that I wanted to say is for resume, you need to remember a simple acronym that is FCQBG. That's what exactly is that? The F here stands for format. So your resume obviously needs to have some important sections like your name, your email address, your phone number, and if possible, your LinkedIn profile link on the top. This is usually followed by like the education section, employment section, and extracurriculars. So there's no specific format requirement, but I still believe that the most important sections should be kept, not all the sections, because the space is limited and you only have one page. So if you mention everything, it's just going to look like a newspaper, and you want to create a resume, not a newspaper. Education section, for example, must list your bachelor's and master's degrees if you have one. There's a very short, and then there should be a very short bullet on what your extracurriculars were during your time there. So the purpose of this bullet point is only to see if you will be involved in a similar capacity when you're in the business school also. So be very intentional about this. If you ever attended a business school session, you must know that they say that the past activities are a great reflection of your future. So those things are what matter. I got a lot of questions about how to write your employment if you're also a part-time business owner. So it's perfectly fine to create separate sections. So one will be work experience section, another will be entrepreneurial experience section. And I've already ensured to show that in the samples, so you can see it when you get that. That will be in the Q&A chat. C stands for consistency. And by consistency, I mean the consistency in the format of your resume bullet points. The most popular industry format is the PARS format. The PARS stands for Problem, Action, Results, and Skills Use. As the acronym suggests, you start by defining the problem you're trying to solve, be it marketing, engineering, etc. You're trying to solve a problem that will help your company succeed. Then you move on to define the actions that you took to address it. Remember when I said intentionality, your actions have to be Kellogg leader actions, not just any actions. And what results came out of that? What skills you use should be at the end. So, or what skills you gain can also be put in the end. Focus on your people skills as much as possible, because for MBA, you need people skills. PAR is just parse format with skills section removed. It helps shorten the bullet, but the skills are blended into the actions itself. So that's basically the idea, because it takes a lot of work to blend the skills into the actions and then like understand whether it's coming across right or not. So people usually just go with PARS instead of PAR, because if you don't have a consultant and you're doing things yourself, PAR is the dangerous territory to be in. Then there is the RAS format, which is results, actions, and skills, where putting the results first helps you make the impact come first. And in case someone is skimming through your resume, they can get surprised as to how you managed to achieve anything. And then it also makes them curious. They may actually be willing to read more on that. There is no preference for one over the other in the MBA admissions. You can choose either of these, but I must tell you not to mix them all in one resume. So one consistent bullet format per resume, which can be PARS, PAR, or RAS. So or, not and. And when you look at the samples, which also will be shared in the Q&A chat, you'll be able to see why I'm talking about that, because the resume actually shared with you will be flawed, where those things are actually discussed. So you should be able to spot those flaws based on the webinar. And there's another reason for that, because I know there's a lot of piracy in this industry and things can get around without context, passed around without context. So if someone just gets the duplicate copy of the resume, they'll just make a mistake in the resume. So by all means, if you want to get involved in piracy, by all means, go ahead. We're still protected on that front. Next, we move on to quantification. So most heard of in the MBA admissions industry is like the phrase, your bullets need to be well quantified. Okay, that's fine. So while quantification is usually more or less mandatory in the impact or the results that we talked about, it would also not hurt to mention the size of the team or any other kind of a number that can help the particular incident become more credible. So if you think you don't know how to quantify the bullet, that's completely fine. Just sit back and think, how exactly is your company using you to make money? And the thoughts will just start popping up that your company is just paying you 6 lakhs and they're getting 60 crores for a particular project. That's brilliant. That's exactly what quantification means. So you have found your position in the company, you have found out how much money your role is providing to the company, put it in the bullet. As it says on the slide, you can highlight operational efficiency, revenue increase, sales, etc. with numbers, percentage, cash, whatever, depending on what you did. Just remember that you need to enter the currency of the country that you're applying to. For this particular school, that would be US dollars. And I can understand that because of the purchasing power parity and the exchange rate difference, the converted amount may look smaller in dollars. So you can accompany this with percentage change in something to show a greater impact. Simple, straightforward, nothing too much to think about. Quantify everything. Make sure that you highlight the currency that of the country that you're applying to, and you should more or less be fine. There is no downside to quantification unless you do it wrong. And in that case, it will be considered misrepresentation, in which case you can face lawsuits. You can also get your admissions cancelled and more. Anyway, moving on to B, which stands for branding. This is actually the most important one. And I've put this in the resume, but this is actually important for your entire application. Why? I'll tell you later, but let's understand what I mean by branding with this phrase. A hero can rarely be a sage, and a sage can rarely be a rebel. So if you read those words, you know that all three of these have different personalities. A hero is someone who steps in and takes the responsibility for the people and solves their problem to rally people behind him. A sage is someone who shares his wisdom and helps solve people's problems, and people rally behind them because of their intelligence. A rebel is someone that disrupts the status quo by creating something completely different from what used to be. And their rebellious attitude and their uniqueness attracts people who rally behind them because they were too frustrated with the status quo. If you see what the commonality is in each of these, is the people rally each of these personality types, which means most of these personality types can be leaders. What's different though is their attitude towards certain things. Rebels are challenging the status quo. Heroes could challenge the status quo. They are just taking responsibility, obviously, but they're more about protecting the people who they are trying to lead, etc., etc. So that's basically the idea. So the way you show your brand needs to stay consistent, not just in your resume, but also in your essays and LORs. And your people skills are what matter. So what do I mean by staying consistent in your essays, resume, and LORs? So let's say you have picked your personality as some sort of like think bravely. So you've attended the workshop and you know that they are trying to look for people who are empaths mostly, but they have a little bit of a rebellious side to them. So empath with some rebel qualities. Now, in your letter of recommendation, your recommendation is glowing, everything is positive, nothing's wrong with it, except your recommender has branded you as a sage, someone who is very intelligent. And because of that intelligence, people rally behind you. So, what's the problem here? Misalignment. So, they are not seeing the Kellogg leader in this. What kind of a Kellogg leader are you? Is not coming across in one of these. And that exactly will lose you points on self awareness. And when you lose points on self awareness, that's where you lose the whole application. And with M7, schools are already picky enough as it is. So do you really think you should be taking that kind of a risk? That's my question. Anyhow, so that's branding. And that's exactly how you need to tackle branding in your MBA application, not just your resume. So just be careful about how you brand yourself. Another thing I can give you is the branding matrix. If you just Google this down, and there is a whole chart that will come up, so it can help you understand what your personal brand is. So brainstorming wise, this can help you a little bit. G stands for goals, which is the last one. And this is the most overlooked part, so please pay attention. Forgetting that your resume needs to contain transferable skills more relevant to your post MBA goals is one of the biggest mistakes people have made. So here's how you can modify your resume to meet those requirements. First, let's take the industry. We have been doing management consulting, so we'll go with that. Next, the function, so associate. Then the target company, McKinsey, and school's feeder location, Chicago. Once we have your goal information, we just look for the job description on their website, and you can pick out the key skills from their job description and see if your bullets are matching those and plug those in. Pretty simple, straightforward. You just have to, like, if you're using PARS or RAS, this becomes much easier because your skills can easily be plugged in. And then a better way of dealing with this is to use the generative AI tools and let them give you the overlapping keywords. So you put the bullets you have created into the Gen AI, then you put the job description and let the AI tell you what the overlapping keywords are. So again, you're using AI not to create the bullets points or your resume or anything else. You're using it as a tool, not to create the resume bullets in any way. So I'm not saying you should be using AI to create application, but using AI as a tool to just save yourself some time and let it give you some ideas, that's okay. That's brainstorming. That's not application creation. There's a difference. And here we are at the end of this session. And a little surprise for you before we move on to the Q&A and samples, which will happen right after this stream. So if you want to ask any questions, now would be a good time. So MBA Times is offering the Hail Mary service at a discount of 50%. You will only have to pay $250 per school to get personalized one-time feedback on your whole application, from your resume and essays to extracurriculars. Everything will be covered in a personalized feedback for you. So if you want to opt into that, it's literally at the price of the application fee of the schools. And if you actually opt into the service early enough, there is a very good possibility that you can also get some hints and some tips on how to get application fee waivers from the school. So it's technically net zero. Now, coming to the application code, here's the code for us, not for the Kellogg application, but you can use the code Kellogg Mega 2025 to avail the offer, the Hail Mary offer I'm talking about. We also have bulk discounts in case you want to opt for it. And the website will have an option to select the number of schools. So you can scan this QR code and this will take you to the website. Alternatively, you can visit MBA Times by going to www.mba-times.com/code to request the code yourself. And all of these things are only available for the attendees only and the registrants, obviously. So if you've not registered, it would be a good time to register. And if you want to Avail the service by all means. Just scan this QR code and it will take you to the page. Now, as promised, I'll take you to the agenda slide. Yes. And if you have any questions, you can just scan the QR code right there and it will take you to the Q&A chat, and I'll just see you guys there. And I'll end this live stream now. So I hope you had some good that came out of this live stream. Have a nice day.